But let's start with the basics. The U.S. 26-man roster for Copa America. Dropping in between our last show and this one. I think we were last with you after the Brazil game, which finished in a 1-1 draw. This is the second youngest Copa squad since 2007, Herc, which I believe you were on that squad. Is that correct? We got 9 players, 23 and under on this team, 18 players that were on the World Cup squad in Qatar. Timothy Tillman is the only player that was dropped. You'll remember there was 27 on the preliminary roster, and as we discussed quite a bit, there are 4 strikers on this team. Valerian Balogun, Ricardo Pepi, Josh Sargent, and Haji Wright, who we know has been discussed as a winger. Herc, the U.S. roster looks strong, but is it better than the World Cup roster that we saw in 2022?
It is better than that roster. Now, you mentioned that 2007 roster for the Copa America. That roster was a second team. The first team, because the camps overlapped, was actually playing the Gold Cup, 2007 Gold Cup in Chicago, that final versus the Mexican national team that they won. If you remember that Benny Faulhaber screamer over Osvaldo Sanchez. Yeah, just if you needed a refresher. So that's why that team was so young. But going on to this very young team, is this team, the 2024 Copa America roster, better than the 2022 World Cup roster? Yes, Seb, yes it is. Let's go back to that 2022 World Cup roster and the players you had on that. Go to this one, you only have 3 MLS players. Of those MLS players, maybe one only sees some type of real minutes, and I'm talking about Miles Robinson, the other being a goalkeeper, and then you have Shaq Moore, who is in case you need him, in case of an emergency. And even then, I think Greg Berhalter may go a Yunus Musa, Weston McKennie, or whoever else, Timothy Weah, in that right-back role. This is a very strong roster. These kids, this young roster, back in that 2022 roster, was very, very green. They're no longer that green. They have this experience, World Cup experience. In fact, I believe 20 of these 26 have that World Cup experience. The majority of these players have Champions League experience. The majority of these players are coming off championship seasons, lifting trophies, great individual seasons, some of those players. Not just one, but multiple of those categories. So this is a much better team. And you also have to include the manager in that. Very inexperienced manager back then. Think of what you will of him now. He has that experience of being in a knockout round, learning from those moments, being in big tournaments, having time with this team. This is a better roster now than it ever was before.
So I'm interested that you brought in the MLS number, right? 3 MLS guys on this roster. There were 9 on the team in Qatar in 2022. You could look at that and say, well, right there, it's proof that this roster is better. I think you're right. But, Herc, I think even if we go kind of name by name, if we look at who's gone and who's in, you can see that this roster is better, right? In Pepi, Balogun, Malik Tillman, Cardoso wasn't there, Miles Robinson, remember, an injury miss, Christopher Lund, he's a new addition, Mark McKenzie, Chris Richards. Of that group, Chris Richards is a definite starter just about. Balogun and Pepi we know are probably going to start. We don't know which one, but one of those 2 guys is probably starting at 9. And Cardoso, we saw him start a game. It didn't go well against Colombia, but that's another guy who could contribute. The guys that you don't have, who aren't here from that World Cup roster, Jesus Ferreira, Jordan Morris, Christian Roldan, Kellen Acosta, Walker Zimmerman, DeAndre Yedlin, Aaron Long, Serginho Dest. Dest is the big name that's missing. But outside of that, the guys that you've lost, you haven't really lost too much, have you?
No. So think about this for a second. Now, I know this stat blew up in everybody's face versus Colombia, but you had a top 5 European League all 11. That's where the U.S. men's national team is today with its pool of players. That's where this roster, this Copa America roster, is today. That's why the responsibility is so great for Greg Berhalter. If we're just going off the names, if we're just going off the roster, this 2024 roster blows that one out of the water. These kids now have World Cup experience. The likes of a Christian Pulisic has a World Cup goal. The likes of Timothy Weah has a World Cup goal. Matt Turner, for as horrendous as the season has gone for him, is a goalkeeper, a World Cup goalkeeper with experience in keeping the ball out of the back of his net. You have some players who have gained valuable experience at the international level. This is a better roster.
Yeah, better roster, but I have a question about whether or not it's a better team.
Different question. Different topic.
Different question, but answer it for me here. Because I look at it, and a lot of the big question mark, Hercs, that we had coming out of that World Cup are basically still there, right? We didn't really know who the number 9 was going to be. We still don't really know that. I think in defense, you got a lot of question marks in that back line. Everybody coming out of the World Cup would sell, well, for sure, Tim Ream won't be here. for Copa America. We'll have figured something else back there. Still haven't figured that out. Serginho Dest is no longer there. The strength of the U.S. team at the World Cup was the MMA midfield, and a big part of that strength was Adams. Adams is not part of this new MMG midfield, and we don't know what that looks like at elite international level competition. Maybe it looks good against CONCACAF, but this isn't just going to be CONCACAF. So to me, a lot of those questions, and I throw Matt Turner in there as well, make me say, yes, better roster, but I don't know if better team, because some big parts, Turner, Adams, are not the same as they were in 2022, and some of those big question marks, Herc, still remain. We all thought Balogun would be the locked-in #1 by now, or at least a lot of people did when he joined the pool. But he clearly has not taken that job and made it his.
You didn't even mention Gio Reyna. So a talent like Gio Reyna, who many want to include as a lockdown starter in this group, it was MMA. It wasn't MMGA. It wasn't MGA. It was MMA. Now he's in that midfield, or in that triangle, if you will, as a playmaker. How do you factor that in? How do you move forward? I agree with what you're saying, and a big part of that's the manager, is how do you fit these pieces? How do you make this puzzle work for this team going forward? That's a very good team, young team that proved something to themselves at that World Cup. Maybe it wasn't a great World Cup in terms of the 2002 World Cup team and the run they made, but for how young they were, getting out of their group, and to where they got, you would certainly say it was a success for that group. But I agree with you. Is it a better team? Remains to be seen.
If we look at the 26-player roster, Herc, we did this exercise with Mexico last week. Where do you think the strength lies for Greg Berhalter's group?
I revert back to the player pool. And I think we've spoken about this. This is what makes, or what gets fans so optimistic about this group, about them being a good team. It isn't the string of results over Mexico, albeit that's fun for the fans. That doesn't prove anything. Wins over the worst Mexican generation shouldn't prove anything. It's what you do against top teams, top quality teams that they've not done. But what gives you hope is the individual player pool. You can go down this list. You've never had such a vast player pool of players who are playing Champions League football, players who are important to their clubs in important leagues, important clubs, players who individually have already won Champions League, who are on some of the best teams in the world. It's the player pool that gets you excited. That's the biggest, I would say, strength, and will continue to be a strength because you have so many players littered around Europe and will continue to go to Europe. That's the biggest strength on this team.
Yeah, and that means depth too. And in a tournament,
of course,
where you go, if you go deep, and we don't know if they're going to go deep, but if they go deep, you're going to pick up injuries, you're going to pick up suspensions. Remember, there were areas like at the #9 where they kind of ran out of depth in Qatar. You hope they're just a little bit deeper maybe in some of those key areas should they go deep here in the Copa America. My strength here is a little bit different. It's a position, very specifically the wing play. I think if we look at this U.S. pool and you look at not just the guys who start, your Christian Pulisic and Tim Weahs, I think those are your lockdown starters, but the guys behind them who can give you a little bit difference, that's where your strength, and that's frankly, Herc, where most of your goals are coming from. I know a lot of people point to Gio Reyna, and he's a very creative player in the middle, but when you watch this team in big games, it is Christian Pulisic over and over and over again who's either scoring or creating the goals for others. We saw it against Brazil. I'll never forget the way he laid his body on the line in the World Cup against Iran for that goal that put them into the knockout rounds. And Tim Weah, for me, is the same. I know he's not coming in hot like Christian Pulisic is right now. But if you think about what Weah has been for the national team, it's a consistent role, and he's always getting in behind. He's always trouble for the opponents. He's always dangerous. And I haven't even mentioned somebody like Haji Wright, who I know we think of as a #9, or we've discussed mostly as a #9. But clearly, Berhalter sees him as a player that can play out on the wing. It's what he did mostly in a very successful club season as well. And even somebody, Herc, like Brendan Aronson, I think, who didn't have a great season, can be a very useful player off the bench late in the game. If you tell me where is this team deep and where is this team good and where are the goals likely to come from on this team, I'm pointing to the wings. And it's hard to really point too many other places.
Yeah, I'll get to why those wingers have the opportunities they have in a bit. Did you see that list? It's Christian Pulisic behind Vinny Jr., who's going to be a candidate for the Ballon d'Or. And then you have Rafinha, who plays for Barcelona, and Savio, who's one of the best wingers in the world, had a hell of a season with Girona. That is where Christian Pulisic is today in terms of wingers in this tournament. That should show you how much of a ridiculous season this man has had. I I can't disagree with what you're saying, and I'm going to get to it when I talk about the biggest, I would say, weakness for this team is probably why the wingers do so well. If you want to go there now, if we want to talk about the weakness, it's the number 9 position. Now, let me tell you why it's the number 9 position. It's not these players themselves, Seb. It's the way they're utilized. Why is it that you have these 9s who do well at their club, very well, ridiculously well at their club, a tale as old as time, but they get to the U.S. men's national team, and it's a different story. I'm talking about guys who, one point in time, have killed it at the club level, wherever their club level was at. Guys like Ricardo Pepi, guys like Josh Sargent, guys like Daryl Dike, Haji Wright, Jesus Ferreira, Folarin Balogun, Jordan Pifak. For whatever reason, they do well at the club level. Once they come to the international level, the U.S. men's national team, why don't they do well? It's the setup. It's the way Greg Berhalter uses these 9s in this system where they're a facilitator. They cater to the wingers, which is why the strength for this U.S. men's national team is the wingers, like you just rightfully pointed out. It's because that 9 is a facilitator. That 9 needs to interpret space, needs to be oftentimes a dummy, a decoy for that wing play. And it's not conducive to these players.
Herc, is Greg Berhalter wrong to build his attack that way, though? I mean, I would say if I got to give the ball to one guy, Christian Pulisic or any of those number 9s, I'm building through Pulisic or even Weah ahead of those number 9s. So I hear what you're saying, but I don't blame Berhalter for not picking a 9 that's not going to help those guys, because those are your guys.
I blame a coach who has quality finishers and can't make them quality finishers on his team. I blame a coach for that. Now, Christian Pulisic has no problem and has never had a problem playing with quality 9s in his club career. Why is it the exception now on the U.S. men's national team? Why can Christian Pulisic play with a quality 9 in AC Milan and also get his goals, but he gets his assist, but it's different on the U.S. men's national team? Why are we ignoring that there are some quality goal scorers in the pool for the first time ever? It's not a 9 issue. It's the way you use the 9. That, to me, is a weakness. There's going to come a time where the goals aren't going to come from Christian Pulisic. They're not going to come from Timothy Weah. You're going to need somebody to bail you out. Usually that person who bails you out is a 9. Why can't that 9 function in this system?
All right, you're saying it's a weakness. Let me ask you this. If we compare this batch of strikers to the Qatar strikers, who do you think's stronger? This batch, Pepi, Balogun, Sargent, I guess nominally right. And, of course, in 22 you had Sargent, Haji Wright, and Jesus Ferreira.
This batch is a better batch of players. Now, Greg Berhalter loves going by the profile.
Enough to make a difference?
Remains to be seen. In the history of the U.S. men's national team with Greg Berhalter, only one striker has made a difference for Greg Berhalter and has saved his job, and that is Ricardo Pepi. He did it as a teenager. But he did that in a string of games, and he wasn't even rewarded with the World Cup. He was left home. That's where he was at. He was watching from home. So will it make a difference this go-around? Remains to be seen. I hope, because we've never had, the U.S. men's national team has never had a pool of forwards like this, as talented as these players. You've got to take advantage of it. Folarin Balogun at one point was a 20-plus goal, contribution in one of the top 5 leagues in the world. Haji Wright, from multiple positions, was tearing up and scoring goals against United. A bad call, blown call away from being an FA Cup final. You've got guys like Josh Sargent, who have proven when given a chance at the 9 position and can be healthy, that are very good goal scorers. Why is that the exception at the senior level? That can't be. That can't be.
All right, so Herc has chosen his position of expertise as the weakness on the current roster. If I were to have a position of expertise, it would be the back line. And I'm going with the back line here. And I'm including, Herc, Matt Turner in this, right? Because I think the back line in goalie is all kind of part of the same thing. If you look at those positions, and who knows how they're going to line up, but I think we can assume for now it's going to be a back 4 plus Turner. At least 3, Herc, of those positions have a big question mark. Now, Joe Scally, you might feel a lot better about Joe Scally after the game against Brazil than you did after the game against Colombia. But, man, that game against Colombia left a lot of questions about the depth behind Sergiño Dest. And we already know what you're losing going forward with Sergiño Dest, which might have an impact, Turk, on just how dangerous Tim Weah is when we go back to that winger conversation. Beyond that, again, Tim Ream is a guy who I think most fans thought would have been replaced after the World Cup and before this international tournament. Not only is he still there, but he's coming off an end of the season where he wasn't getting first-team starts for Fulham on a regular basis. That's a concern. And then on top of that, we got the Matt Turner situation, which is a goalie who's basically getting no minutes for 3 to 4 months leading into this major tournament. So, Herc, when I think about those 5 positions, and I can look at 3 of them with big question marks, yeah, you feel great about Anthony Robinson out there on the left side. You feel great about Chris Richards in the middle of the park. But outside of that, man, I'd be worried about the U.S. back line, especially when they get to those knockout round games, especially when they get to that group phase finale against Uruguay.
Yeah, because Tim Ream right now, despite his age, is still a major contributor for the U.S. men's national team, and you're banking on him staying a major contributor for the U.S. men's national team for 2 more years. Will that be the case? Very unlikely. Tim Ream has proven us wrong many times before, but the odds are against him here. And Miles Robinson not making the jump to Europe has maybe cost him in the eyes of Greg Berhalter because he's not gotten that opportunity again. And he's a player who's having a hell of a season in Major League Soccer right now with FC Cincinnati. So who's going to be that center back duo come 2026? If Serginho Dest isn't the same player come 2026 or come this next summer, you know, is Joe Scally ready? Can he be that player for you on the right-hand side? He's shown flashes of it, sure, but can he be that consistent playmaker? If Anthony Robinson is to go down, are we having another situation like Serginho Dest where you're really grasping at straws to see there? And then Matt Turner, how can he react? What club does he go? What form can he stay in? The last positive outing, one of the few of the year, was that Brazil game. So can he maintain that? I agree with what you're saying. It is a lot of question marks and not very much consistent output there.